Hey, this is Dr. Ben Weitz, host of the Rational Wellness Podcast. I talk to the leading health and nutrition experts and researchers in the field to bring you the latest in cutting-edge health information. Subscribe to the Rational Wellness Podcast for weekly updates. And to learn more, check out my website, drweitz.com. Thanks for joining me, and let's jump into the podcast. Hello, Rational Wellness Podcasters. Today, we will be interviewing Shawn Wells, and I'm very excited about this conversation. And he is a nutritional biochemist and expert on health optimization. Shawn has a master's in public health. He's a licensed dietary nutritionist and an expert at formulating nutritional supplements, as well as on health optimization. And Shawn has a fantastic new book, The Energy Formula, which has just been released. This book is about biohacking, mitochondrial support, keto, cold plunges, red light saunas, fasting, meditation, supplements, and a ton more really cool stuff. So, Shawn, thank you so much for joining us today.
Oh, thanks for having me on, Ben. I appreciate it.
Excellent. So perhaps you can tell us about your personal health journey and some of the health challenges that have brought you to where you are today.
Oh, man. And I think this is kind of the case with, anyone that's like an expert at what they do and they've had the hero's journey, if you will. And for me, that's definitely the case. I've been through a lot health-wise. I had one point where I had Epstein-Barr virus, fibromyalgia, chronic fatigue syndrome, Hashimoto's all at once. Wow. My body was just shutting down. I was in bed for about 6 months in pain, inflamed, thinking that my life was over. This was in the midst of me getting my master's at UNC Chapel Hill in nutritional biochemistry. And I thought, I literally thought about committing suicide because I thought all the stuff that I'd been studying and working on would be pointless, that if I was in bed the rest of my life. And that's when I stumbled into keto. That's when I was interested in sports nutrition supplements and performance at the time. I was working out a lot. I had transformed my body from being morbidly obese and even having disordered eating, where I went from really morbid obesity to anorexia, going from 300 pounds to 150 pounds to orthorexic at 220 pounds.
Wow.
So I went through it. It was a heck of a journey. But after I went through this autoimmune stuff, stumbled into keto, stumbled into different supplements for very different purposes than sports nutrition and performance, which was my passion. That's when I discovered all these things, and it really helped transform me and get me out of bed, out of the pain, out of the inflammation, and get me back into class. And, I had faith in supplements and nutrition before because, again, I had lost so much weight and, started to see my sports performance and strength improve pretty dramatically. But when I felt like I was dying to come back from that, that's when I got like a lot more serious in a different way. And that's when I started, really wanting to help people on a deeper level. And then about 8 years ago, I had a brain tumor that kind of changed a lot of things too. And that's when I started to dig into mental health much more deeply and explore exogenous ketones and C8 MCTs and different race TAMs and fish oils and all these kinds of things for people that have, been through not only brain tumors, but, depression like I had suffered. And how that works and what supplements and diet can do there. So those are some of the big things that I've been through. And it's been
enough challenges for like 5 people to have to deal with.
Yeah, exactly. But, I said in a presentation a couple of years when I came forward about my depression that I've suffered for most of my life and even suicidal thoughts, was that my broken is my beautiful. That like, it's what connects me to people. It's what's given me my hero's journey. It's what's given me my passion for my area of study. And I feel like other people have connected pretty deeply with it as well. Like when I've I was very reluctant at one conference when I really opened up about like telling my story and getting really deep into it, because I thought they'd only want to hear about science and supplements, and it was just the opposite. You know, it was people like just coming up to me in droves after saying like, thank you for saying that. I've been suffering too. Like, so that really was cathartic for me to like bare my soul, because up until that point, I felt like as a health influencer, a dietitian, like all these things, like I need to show the perfect image. And for me to show that I've fought obesity and disordered eating, that I've fought anorexia, and I've had all these immune system issues and brain tumors, and I still fight depression. Like even now, like, I thought that I would be rejected for that. And to not only not be rejected, but for the most part, people really lift me up for it. That's been powerful in my journey of really changing the feel of my brand and making it more me, instead of just trying to do whatever I think will connect with them.
Yeah, no, that's a really powerful concept. And I think there's no doubt that when you can connect with people on an emotional level, I know it's a struggle for me because I'm very, very focused on science, and I got a philosophy degree and rigorous logical thought. And yet, when you can connect with people on an emotional level, it means so much more. I was watching this trial that's going on TV right now, and the first day or so, they had all these emotional discussions about this person and, what he meant to people. And the jury was riveted. And then they started into all these slide presentations and showing charts, and the jury was nodding off. So there's no doubt that when you can connect with people on an emotional level, it means so much more.
Yeah, for sure.
So let's dig into your book. And I know that we can only touch on a small amount in the next 50 minutes or so that we have, but I definitely would like to hit some of the supplement stuff, because you're such a great resource on that, and I'm really fascinated with that. But the subtitle of your book is The 6 Foundational Pillars to Cultivate a More Caring, Compassionate, Connected, Unified, and purpose-filled life. So maybe you can go into these foundational pillars a little bit.
Yeah. So the energy formula, energy is an acronym, and it means experiment, nutrition, exercise, routines, growth, and your tribe. So that's the ENERGY. And so those are 6 letters and 6 topics in the book, and it's organized in such a way that it has that flow that I think really goes from like the most scientific. So, what you want, if you will, like if you're someone that's a biohacker, but by the end, it'll also give you what you need. And so we can go through that. Like, so experiment, the first chapter really revolves around like epigenetics, blood work, bioindividuality, meaning like, it's not one size fits all. And I get into that pretty deeply, that a supplement that works for someone might not work for you. And having that data through genetics, through blood work, but also through your own intuition is really important. And doing one thing at a time is part of that, so that you can delineate and give yourself that intuition. You can say, what am I feeling in my body? What is this doing for me? Whether it's, exercise, diets, supplements, whatever it is that you're adding in, how do you know that it's actually working for you? Having metrics, trusting your intuition, that's really important. So we get into that in experiment. And then nutrition, we get into keto, paleo, vegan, carnivore, Mediterranean, all these different diets, and explain which one might be the best fit for you because of, again, bioindividuality. I don't oversell anything. Like, I do keto, but that's not necessarily the best fit for everyone. The one thing that I do consistently sell is the idea of using whole foods and getting away from ultra processed foods. That should be something, whether you're a vegan, you're carnivore, you're Mediterranean, or anything in between, we should all agree on whole foods without a doubt. And so the next chapter is exercise. A lot of cool shortcuts there for getting faster results for recovery, for hypertrophy, for strength, whatever it is you're working on. I get into why high intensity interval training is better than low intensity steady state, in terms of results at least. And then some other hacks like intraset stretching and blood flow restriction, like really cool data-backed hacks to get more results in less time. And then the next chapter is routines. So getting into circadian rhythm here and the sleep-wake cycle, the optimal eating windows, according to researchers like Dr. Sachin Panda, you want to eat during the daylight window, and then covering what sleep fortresses look like in terms of making your bedroom a sleep fortress that's meant for purely sleep and, of course, secondarily sex, but that's it. Is just those things. It's not meant for TVs, for long discussions, for a bunch of devices, for an office. A bedroom needs to be a sleep fortress. And then getting into sleep hygiene, what like a good schedule looks like to go to sleep, and then also that morning routine and how critical that is and what that can look like. Just 10 minutes I get into can be a game changer, where you do some breath work as you wake up, do some gratitude and affirmations, do some light stretching and grab some water. I mean, those things, that's 10 minutes and you can really transform your day and you feeling like you own the day instead of just stumbling into it and rushing through it. Then moving into growth, I get into stoic mindset, the obstacle is the way type thinking, the resilient type thinking. And resilience is really like a through line throughout the book. And then I also cover extended and intermittent fasting, which ties in well to the routines and that circadian rhythm discussion again with Dr. Sachin Panda, and having your eating window again during the daylight hours, and your restricted feeding time being during the dark hours, if you will. And then lastly, moving into your tribe, which is, if you look at the blue zones, where people are super centenarians, they live past 100, like what are the things they have in common? They have connection and community. And then even the longest study of all time, the greatest study of all time, the Harvard study that's over 80 years running, multiple generations, thousands of people they've examined for longevity. And the number one predictor of longevity is quality of relationships. And so I get into all that in your tribe and how important these things are, and that you're the product of the 5 people closest to you. So that is the book in summation. There's so much in there. There's over 60. The whole thing's full color front to back. So that's why the hardcover is $39.99. It cost me $39.80 to make it. But you can get the ebook for $1.99, and we now have the Audible, but which I read myself. But there's 60 full color diagrams. There's surveys to assess your progress, chapter summaries if you just don't want to read everything. There's formulators corners that gets into all the supplements, the brands, the doses, resource hacks that covers the techniques, the tips, the apps that you need to get going on, the devices, all that stuff. So it's chock full of information. And I'd love to discuss whatever you're interested in here, Ben.
Okay, so I picked a few things out. So based on energy, one of the important factors is mitochondrial health. So maybe we could talk a little bit about how do we promote and optimize mitochondrial health?
Yeah, that's a great question, and something that I'm super passionate about, because I've lived most of my life without energy, because I was, when I was younger, I was, bullied, and I ate like a lot of junk food, and I was obese, and then I dealt with the autoimmune stuff and even the brain tumor. And I know what it's like to just be struggling for energy. And so I've explored mitochondrial health quite a bit. The ketogenic diet, obviously, if you're someone that's metabolically dysfunctional, if you're insulin resistant, this is going to be a powerful tool. It's different than just weight loss because you are providing an alternate fuel source when you're in states of insufficient cellular energy. And if you're insulin resistant, you're just not getting enough glucose into the cell to use as fuel. So that's why there's some people that are, overweight or insulin resistant, that like keto can be like turning the lights on for them. It just feels like a boom of energy. And for some people, it's not. But for people that are metabolically dysfunctional, it can be quite powerful. And then adding to that, which will raise ketones further, and is almost like the holy trinity when you do paleo keto and intermittent fasting, that can be really powerful. Because again, you're raising ketones. You're also getting control of your snacking. And it's been shown that periods of fasting will promote mitochondrial biogenesis, meaning create more mitochondria. And it will also initiate autophagy, which means that cellular detox, cleaning up those cells, and even something called mitophagy, cleaning up the mitochondria. So fasting is a powerful tool for helping mitochondrial energy. And then getting into some supplements that I discuss in the book.
Hang on a second. Let's hit on the keto diet for a minute.
Yeah, sure.
It's not the program that works best for me, but I've guided some clients through a keto program. And some of the challenges I have found is making sure that they can get enough a diversity of vegetables, because vegetables often get left out of that keto program. And then how do you get enough fat without just slathering on, butter, or, it's really hard to get enough, from what I found, healthy fat on a keto program.
Yeah, so that's an interesting question, and this is going to vary from person to person, but know that the ketogenic diet, for all that happens with people, saying, oh, it's bacon and it's burgers and it's this and it's that. Keto is a set of macronutrient ratios. You could be vegan and be keto. You can be carnivore and be keto. You can be Mediterranean and keto. It's just macronutrient ratios. So how you execute on that is up to you. I mean, there can be what's called lazy keto or dirty keto, where you're eating a lot of desserts and processed foods and things like that. That's probably not ideal. It may help with some weight loss, but, long-term, that's probably not an ideal lifestyle.
Your ideal keto ratio is what on the macros?
Yeah, it's probably something like 70% of calories from fats, 25% calories from protein, and then 0 to 5% coming from carbohydrate, and mostly fiber from the vegetables.
So yeah, that's the tricky part, is how do you have enough calories left to get your vegetables in, and then how do you get that much fat and still make it healthy?
Well, there's a couple things there. So with the vegetables, I get plenty in, especially if it's the high fiber, low glycemic, low carb kind of vegetables. Think things like cauliflower and broccoli, asparagus, Brussels sprouts, obviously lettuce and kale and spinach, things like that are nutrient dense, but low calorie and certainly low carb. Ones that you can kind of run into some problems are the ones that are the traditional American vegetables, because they're high sugar, high starch, that really aren't as healthy as you'd think. Because of that, they're high glycemic. And so things like peas, carrots, corn, those might be a little less keto friendly. So there's plenty of vegetables that you can have. And then to your point, I think, I've talked to Dr. Daniel Stickler, who's a doctor I work with out of Austin, and he feels like the most powerful diet right now in terms of data would be something like a Mediterranean keto diet. So, I mean, keto is powerful. Using fats for fuel is a powerful tool, and limiting the amount of certainly processed or high glycemic carbohydrate can be powerful as well, especially if, again, you're insulin resistant. But getting in plenty of like the monounsaturated fats, like olive oil, can be extremely healthy. So yeah, it takes some planning, but that's what I would look at. I would look at some of the tenets of paleo. The most important would be from paleo is dropping allergens and eating whole food. The tenets of keto is getting away from high carbohydrates, potentially that's high glycemic, and then getting adapted to using fat for fuel, and at least being metabolically flexible where you can use glucose or fat for fuel. And then lastly would be the components of Mediterranean, where you're, eating some of these healthy meats, like especially fish. You're having a lot of fresh vegetables, and you're having things like olive oil in a high amount. And, that would be a pretty powerful trinity. And then add to that maybe some intermittent fasting, like a 16 and 8. And that would really be the ultimate combination to me.
Let's not forget the red wine.
Yeah, exactly. I'm a big fan of that. Just around like one glass and sipping it, with a meal and having it. What's important is, I think with red wine, when you think about Mediterranean, yes, there's benefits to having this polyphenol, the resveratrol. And yes, there's actually benefits to 1 to 2 glasses of alcohol a day in terms of it's a hormetic stress to the mitochondria. It's a positive stress in a good way that actually stimulates the mitochondria to be stronger. And it also has a vasodilation effect on your arteries. So a small amount of alcohol can be healthy. It's just we tend to slam it and we tend to drink too much and it becomes unhealthy. But another factor in this is the way that they drink it. And again, going back to these blue zones, like Sardinia, Italy, that is Mediterranean, they have the community and the connection, and they eat meals for a couple hours and they prepare those meals themselves. And, they're sitting with 10 people. And so when they're drinking wine, it's a different experience with that wine drinking than it might be for us when we just might pound it and maybe we're alone. And, it's a very different thing. So that's something that has to be factored in as well.
I've really been enjoying this discussion, but I'd like to take a minute to tell you about a new product that I'm very excited about. I'd like to tell you about a new wearable called the Apollo. And this is a device that can be worn on the wrist or the ankle, and it uses vibrations to stimulate your parasympathetic nervous system. And this device has amazing benefits in terms of getting you out of that stressed out sympathetic nervous system and stimulating the parasympathetic nervous system. It has a number of different functions, especially helping you to relax, to focus, to concentrate, to get into a deeper meditative state, even to help you sleep. And there's even a mode to help you wake up. And this all occurs through the scientific use of subtle vibrations. For those of you who might be interested in getting the Apollo for yourself to help you reset your nervous system, go to apolloneuro.com and use the affiliate code Weitz10. That's my last name, Weitz 10. And now back to the discussion. Let's get into some of the nutraceutical ways to reinforce mitochondrial health.
Yeah. So that's very exciting for me, for sure. So the electron transport chain is part of this whole process. And you probably heard of CoQ10, coenzyme Q10, and that does support that. So, and it depletes as we age, and especially in the mitochondrial dense, more energy intensive cells like heart cells. Heart cells can have up to 5,000 mitochondria per cell. And so they need a lot of energy.
Ubiquinone versus ubiquinol?
Yeah, so that's a great question. Yeah, the ubiquinol is the reduced form, and that's kind of its more active form. As we age, we have a harder and harder time converting the ubiquinone into ubiquinol. So I would definitely say if you're past 40 and certainly past 50, to invest in the more expensive ubiquinol form. If you're young, you actually can convert it pretty well, so you don't need to spend the extra money. But it's something to be mindful of as you age, is to probably invest in the better form. And then another nutrient that supports CoQ10 that at one point was being studied for vitamin status is PQQ. So that's one to get as well and take with ubiquinol or ubiquinone. I would look to take anywhere from like 100 to 200 milligrams a day. And then PQQ, like 10 to 20 milligrams a day. And then moving into things that boost NAD levels, which is important in that Krebs cycle. And we've found is associated with being more resilient, keeping your telomeres longer, producing more cellular energy, helping with mitochondrial health overall and biogenesis, activating your sirtuin genes, which are associated with anti-aging. So boosting NAD is critical. And as we age, we make less NAD and we consume more of it faster. So it's a double whammy. And so getting something like NMN, nicotinamide mononucleotide, as a supplement of around a gram a day or more would be ideal to boost NAD levels. Probably the best way is to go do IV NAD, but that does get expensive and you have to sit there for about 3 hours and you feel kind of a little nauseous sometimes when you're doing it. So it's not fun, but that is something that's very effective. But the best supplement that I've seen is the NMN. And
what about the NR?
Yeah, and that's one that I feel less strong about. There's a bigger backing of it because of, we'll say, patents and the people that have been hired around it and the marketing machine around it. But I'm a bigger fan from the data I've seen of NMN. And, you know, Dr. Peta Attia, Dr. Rhonda Patrick, Dr. David Sinclair would all agree with what I'm saying. So I lean towards NMN. And then with polyphenols.
By the way, is there a particular brand of NMN that you like?
Yeah, you know, look for ones that talk about they're stabilized, because light and heat and moisture can actually convert it into essentially niacin. So you want to be careful whether you're using NR or NMN to get a stabilized form. And then also it's probably ideal to get it in a black container and maybe even keep it in the fridge. That would be ideal. And there is a company that I like that's reasonably priced called Toniq, TONIQ, on Amazon.
Okay.
I found they're the best price and they test out consistently. So that would be one that I would look to use.
Yeah, I just got one from Now, but it's only 125 milligrams per tablet.
So it's expensive, and like it's only been recently that we've been exploring more animal data and extrapolating out of like what these doses would really be. And it's like kind of in that 1 to 2 gram range, which is very expensive and much higher doses per capsule than most people are putting out there. So
maybe we need to try to find somebody to produce it in a powder.
Yeah, exactly. And then to support that NMN, what would be really ideal is certain polyphenols. And like you were mentioning before, trans resveratrol is in red wine and a great polyphenol associated with anti-aging. But probably my 2 favorite ones right now, I'll mention a third too. Out of like, there was 10 of them tested in a recent study, and ficitin, which is from strawberries, tested out to be the most potent at raising NAD levels and supporting NAD. So that would be one I'd look for. There's some supplements.
What's the dosage for ficitin?
It's FISETIN, and it's around like 100 milligrams is a good dose. So, and then on the other side of this, like I was mentioning before, boosting NAD levels, but the other side that would be really effective is if you inhibit what's called CD38, or it's an enzyme also called NADase. And that's the enzyme that's breaking NAD down more quickly as we age. So if we can inhibit that, you'll keep NAD hanging around longer. So there's one polyphenol in particular that's been shown to be super effective at this, and it's called Epigenin. And it comes from parsley. And there's some supplements starting to come out to the market. But one cool one in lieu of those two, it's a little less powerful in both categories, but you can actually increase the bioavailability by getting a liposomal form, is quercetin. And quercetin comes from onions and apples, and it actually works. What's cool is on both sides of this NAD thing, at boosting NAD and inhibiting NADase. So that's a good one too. If you can't find the others, that might be one to look at.
Also serves as a zinc ionophore as well.
Yes, exactly. And for people that have histamine issues,
right,
like Hashimoto's, it's been found to be helpful with. Allergy issues, it's been found to be helpful with. So yeah, quercetin can be a winner on several fronts.
What about pterostilbene? Is that one?
Yeah. So there's tons of really good polyphenols that are out in the world, and that one's from found in blueberries and EG, CG, and green tea, and chlorogenic acid and coffee. And so a lot of these things that we consider our most important food or beverages have these powerful anti-aging compounds in them, and it's definitely cacao is another one, why we love chocolate. There's catechins that are in cacao. So a lot of these foods that are kind of legendary foods and beverages have these powerful anti-aging compounds in them.
In your book, you mentioned something called ergothioneine, which I hadn't heard of.
Yeah, so that's a really cool new one. I'm glad you brought that up. That one is being considered for vitamin status because we do not make it. Huh. And it's such a small dose that we need like maybe 5 to 10 milligrams a day of this unique amino acid, but you can only find it in mushrooms, certain beans, and certain organ meats. But what's really interesting is our body has its own transport system in the body called the ETT, the ergothioneine transporter. Yeah. And it's called the ETT. And what's really cool is there's also a unique storage system for it that your body can pull from as the mitochondria need health, need to be protected, need to be healed. It can pull this ergothioneine as needed. So really cool, almost like the way creatine works, where your muscle builds up creatine stores. And it's amazing for mitochondrial health. And I think it's something that we're going to be discussing more and more. So yeah, getting like anywhere from 5 to 20 milligrams a day of this amino acid would be amazing.
It's kind of an interesting concept being considered as for a new vitamin. It's like being considered for a Nobel Peace Prize or something.
Yeah.
When was the last time we had a new vitamin?
It's been a while. Yeah.
So is there anything that's going to be designated as a new vitamin?
No, I mean, this is it. Like PQQ was probably about 15 years ago was getting considered, and ergothioneine is the most recent one I know of. So very interesting stuff that's happening. Yeah.
How do we assess mitochondrial health or function?
So there are some tests that are coming out that look at this very closely in
ways. Have you experimented with that mito swab test?
Yeah, exactly. I talk about it in the book. I haven't had it yet. That's very new. It's something I'm looking to do in the next few months because of this technology, and they're patenting it and all that stuff. But more straightforward to me, it's a little bit of a one-off, is just looking at your metabolic health by looking at 3 simple labs. You're going to look at inflammation, glycation, and oxidation. So with inflammation, you're looking at C-reactive protein, CRP. With glycation, you're looking at hemoglobin A1C, which is blood sugar damage, by the way. And then oxidation, you're looking at oxidized LDL. All of these labs together would cost about $100. And to me, if we were looking at these, say, every 6 months, I think we could transform medicine pretty radically. It's kind of insane to me that we only look at CRP after you've had a heart attack. We look at hemoglobin A1C after you're a diabetic, and it's only once you've had disease onset that we look at these things. Whereas if we were looking at them earlier, I could essentially tell how you're biologically aging over chronologically aging. I could tell you your likelihood towards 99% of diseases, since 99% of disease is metabolic and not genetic. There's very few diseases that we're born with. Most of these diseases have everything to do with your metabolic health. And largely that ties into insulin resistance and then mitochondrial dysfunction. So,
yeah, I measure those markers all the time in myself and in my patients. And they really should be the standard, as a lot of things should be. Unfortunately, what determines lab testing in our insurance-based healthcare system, unfortunately, is labs that insurance companies have decided they want to pay for.
Yeah, exactly. It's frustrating. It's super frustrating. And we could be so much more proactive with our health if we were mapping this out. You could say, like, what's going on here? And they might say, I changed my diet. I'm going through a divorce. I just lost my job. And, it's like you could jump on that ahead of time. But so many people, it's after they've, had the heart attack, after they have full-blown diabetes and, are about to lose a foot or losing their eyesight, or
after they end up in the ICU with the viral infection. If we had assessed their vitamin D levels and their zinc status and their metabolic function and done something about their obesity and their uncontrolled blood sugar and their uncontrolled oxidation, if we had even considered any of that.
100%. Yeah, it's so frustrating.
It's too bad that right now is not a wake-up call to start focusing on all of those things. But
I agree. I mean, it's sad to me, like, to your point that, we sent out checks to every household in America, but we didn't send out bottles of vitamin D.
Absolutely.
It's so cheap, and so effective and so correlated to COVID and influenza and a number of these viruses, is just to not, or you don't even have to send them out. Like, you can just subsidize it government wise, like where any family can go get, X amount of bottles. Like, and it's so cheap. Vitamin D is so cheap. And what you mentioned, zinc and vitamin C and some of these compounds that are highly correlated to being anti-COVID are so cheap and so easy to access. And we're not talking about them. We're talking about the vaccine and all of these kinds of things. And it is frustrating to me very much.
And levels of obesity, and overweight,
Exactly.
which is just embarrassing.
Exactly. There's no discussion around, like, how much your risk dramatically, precipitously drops when you lose weight, when you change from a insulin resistant promoting diet of ultra processed foods, of high glycemic carbohydrate. We're not talking about those things that, like, hey, fasting could be a powerful tool right now.
Yeah, that's because healthcare is not really about health.
Exactly.
So some of the other supplements you mentioned for mitochondrial support are curcumin, which is one of my favorite supplements. And there are like 9,000 different forms of curcumin, and everybody's claiming that their form is the best form.
Yeah, so that's, definitely. So now addressing like the inflammation, glycation, oxidation, like head on, that would be ideal too. So that's going to help with inflammation modulation is the curcumin. And you're absolutely right. There's a lot of bioavailability issues. So if you're having turmeric with a meal using that spice, then that's great. And, use it as much as you want, kind of like Indian food, and then have it with a fatty meal with plenty of oil and black pepper will help improve its bioavailability along with that oil or slash the fatty meal. But if you're taking it as a supplement, my favorite form that I've seen per research is curcumin, if you're dealing with curcumin directly. And that one's just optimized to be about 50 times better bioavailability. There's a new form that I've worked on.
Curcumin mixed with something else, or what? What is
it? It's essentially like a liposome, and it's called curcumin. There is a form called Mariva that's about
that's the one we've been using most, and then there's Integrative has a specialized form as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I found that the curcumin is even better still than the Mariva.
Okay.
And then there's a new form that I've been working on called Tetrahydrocurcumin that's like the next metabolite down, and it solves a lot of the bioavailability issues. And what's really nice is it's a white powder and doesn't stain everything in its path like curcumin. Curcumin can be a mess.
Oh, yes.
If you've ever had it break in your pants or on it's just a complete mess.
I remember being at a seminar one day and I had a shake. I think it was a Metagenic seminar, and I had a shake with the Ultra Inflamax that had turmeric in it. I spilled it on my khaki pants and
yeah, that's a mess. Then the next one for blood sugar, my favorite compound, and then again, I have a downstream metabolite I've worked on that I can mention, but berberine is the most powerful thing I've seen. It actually outperforms the most powerful drug we know of as a glucose disposal agent, metformin. And metformin has tons of research on anti-aging, not just with diabetes, but healthy people and anti-aging. There was one study where they took, I believe it is actually zinc, DHEA, growth hormone, and metformin. And the people lived on average of what would be like 2 years longer over 90 days, which is just insane. Like what that correlates out to. And I feel
2 year reversal in a 1 year intervention.
Exactly. So that's incredible. And I feel like metformin was driving the majority of that. But berberine was shown.
By the way, they also included vitamin D and zinc in that paper. It's not often highlighted, but.
Yeah, those are powerful too. But yeah, berberine outperformed metformin head to head in a study that was done. And what's cool is berberine and metformin both can have issues with GI distress, can potentially deplete B12. And metformin was actually recalled from the market last year for being tainted. So there's some issues with that. But dihydroberberine is the active form. It's been coming out to the market, and it's about 5 to 10 times more bioavailable. So you can use much lower doses. It lasts about twice as long in the plasma. So you take it less frequently. Doesn't have the B12 issues, doesn't have the GI distress issues. So really cool ingredient. And to me, it's the most powerful anti-aging tool that we have, even ahead of berberine and metformin. So
yeah, the form, just for clarification, the form of metformin that was recalled was the extended release form.
Yeah. Thank you for clarifying that. Yeah.
So to support glutathione, is it best to use glutathione, NAC, or both?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'm on the fence with oral glutathione. Maybe, I think if you're taking a liposomal glutathione, then it's
pretty much all using a liposomal form these days.
Yeah. But otherwise, like if you don't have a lot of money and you don't like the way it tastes and all that kind of stuff, then NAC, N-acetylcysteine, is great at boosting glutathione levels. So that would be. It's a much cheaper way, like especially if you're on a budget, I would say then use NAC. But if your budget's a little bit better, then maybe use the liposomal glutathione.
Is there a dosage of NAC you think is optimal? Is there a dosage that's
fairly high? So the studies with NAC is fairly high. Like it's 600 milligrams, I believe, 3 times a day. So that's
1,800.
Yeah.
Okay. And What do you think is the best way to assess biological aging to see if our anti-aging strategies are working?
Yeah, that's it. I mean, besides the labs that I mentioned, that I feel like there's no like correlation of those labs and a direct analysis to you are X age biologically. But I do think those labs are powerful and you can kind of do that yourself. But there are ways to do this with, telo years. And then there's like the DNA aging with the methylation.
Yeah, I just did that test, the true age through true diagnostics. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And those are interesting. I do think there's a strong correlation there. I think it's going to be like, almost like doing bioimpedance for your weight. Like it's not for your body fat levels. Like it's not necessarily fully accurate, but it's kind of accurate to itself, if that makes sense. So like, I think if you're consistently doing like this true age, the DNA methylation, then you can see it change and what's changing it, like with your diet, with stress reduction, with exercise, all these different things. But I wouldn't necessarily say it's accurate. Are you biologically this age accurately? Not necessarily, but to use it as a metric to compare itself against over time, pretty accurate. So that's the way I would look at it, like something like that. It's a tool.
Right. So you mentioned berberine. What are some of the other strategies for controlling glycation and blood sugar control?
Yeah. So some other ingredients that are very effective there. And again, doing like if you're not doing keto, doing low carb at times, or doing a low glycemic diet will be helpful. Obviously, exercise. What's called a postprandial stroll, just taking a 10-minute walk after you eat, will activate that GLUT4 translocation, pulling blood sugar into the cell. Very powerful to just take a 10-minute walk after you eat.
Postprandial stroll. That's pretty cool. I like that.
Yeah. And then beyond that, there's some really powerful compounds that are out there besides the berberine or dihydroberberine. Cinnamon is one. But just be aware that most cinnamon, both in supplements and like the cinnamon that you're using on your food, is actually not true cinnamon. So what you want to get is Ceylon cinnamon, and it's Ceylon. That's the more effective cinnamon. That's the powerful cinnamon that you want to use on your foods and as a supplement. Beyond that, there's a really...
Lately, like Whole Foods, all they're selling is Vietnamese cinnamon.
Yeah, that's the cheap stuff. Yeah, exactly. That's a kind of loophole. The Ceylon cinnamon's much more expensive, but it honestly, it tastes better. And it's certainly
where do you get it from, or do you order it online?
Yeah, I order it online. I've seen it at times in some stores like Whole Foods, but it's harder to find. But yes, it's easy to get on Amazon. Again, both as a supplement and as a bulk powder. But be aware, it's probably about 10 times more expensive. But then again, how much cinnamon are you really going through? So I think it's worth investing in. It tastes better. It works better. You'll see your blood sugar numbers improve. You do get some benefit from that Vietnamese one in terms of blood sugar. It's just not as potent.
Okay.
Probably the last one that I'd mention for blood sugar is a really powerful one. Well, there's two maybe. There's bitter melon is a really good herb. And then another one that comes from banaba leaf that has corosolic acid is what it's standardized for. And both of those are pretty powerful at lowering blood sugar. And then obviously making sure you're getting enough chromium. We went through a phase in the 80s and 90s where people were taking tons and tons and tons of chromium, and that's not necessarily healthy. But, making sure that you're getting enough chromium is ideal.
How do we know how much chromium is enough?
Well, doing blood work would be the best place to start, but I think the 50 to 200 microgram range is ideal. Like, and not going above that. Like, it was very common in the 80s and 90s. People were taking, many milligrams of this stuff, thinking that more is better, and it's just not a case where that's true.
So the best measure of chromium, is it serum chromium or?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
And was I going to say, what about lipoic acid for blood sugar and
lipoic acid is really an interesting compound. It's insinuated in a lot of antioxidant processes in the body, detoxification processes in the body. The problem with it is it doesn't have great stability as a supplement. So I think a lot of the just straight alpha lipoic acid supplements, I would not invest in. There is, if it's in the salt form, so like alpha lipoic acid sodium is going to be better. And then especially if it's in the R form, which is the active isomer. So R, alpha lipoic acid sodium, is going to be stable and more biologically active. And again, that's going to be more expensive. But if you want to explore that for its benefits, both with blood sugar and then similar to glutathione for detoxification and antioxidant benefits, then use that form.
You have a company that makes that particular form?
I think it's Geranova is the company that has the patent on it.
Okay.
But yeah, look up lipoic acid sodium. And I think you should find something. Yeah.
So how do we know what's a quality nutritional supplement?
Oh, man, great question. One is going to be, I feel like the companies that have been around 20 plus years doesn't mean that the companies that are new aren't legit, but there's a decent chance they are. They're coming into the fray. They haven't had their processes examined to that degree, scrutinized to that degree, but you can trust that companies like Now, Gero, Doctor's Best, Thorne, Carlson's, Barleans, these companies that have been around, even in sports nutrition, Optimum Nutrition, Dymatize, these companies that have been around a long time, they've had to go through many rounds of scrutiny of FDA issues, of legal action, of, different things. And they're here because they've got their stuff squared away. And I've seen the results on all those companies, and they consistently test out. They have good quality control. So definitely picking a company that has like an established reputation like that would be ideal. Certainly looking at reviews on Amazon, but knowing that those can be manipulated. Positive reviews aren't necessarily the most powerful thing, but negative reviews is definitely something to look at. So sometimes I go straight away to the negative reviews and see what's being said there. Because, maybe there's going to be a stability issue, a taste issue, something like that you want to look at. Also looking at proprietary blends. This is probably one of my most important things is I typically avoid proprietary blends. I like full disclosure. I like transparency and labeling. You should be able to
proprietary blends, just for clarification, is where they don't list the exact amount of each ingredient.
Exactly. And so what can happen is, let's say if it's the 700 milligram strength and power blend, that's what it says is this proprietary blend. There's 17 ingredients in it, and you could have 699 milligrams be the first ingredient, creatine, let's say, and then the other 16 ingredients be 1 milligram. And so that's very disreputable, disingenuous to me, and I don't like that. So I like seeing each ingredient laid out one by one. I like seeing the plant part, the genus and species, what it's standardized for. So if it's like, Panax ginseng, standardized for the root, and standardized for 5% ginsenoside A, 200 milligrams. okay, cool. Like now I know everything that's here. Everything's very clear. I can go to examine.com or someplace like that. I can look up studies on it and understand, is this the right dose, the right form? Because another thing, for example, with like ginseng, you get disreputable companies that just list ginseng, and they could be using whole plant, which doesn't have really any of the active, but they're listing ginseng. And obviously that's 1/10 the price and super cheap. We want to be getting the root, so it's just things to look for. And again, like the reputable companies aren't going to be doing this to you. And most of the reputable companies have switched away from proprietary blends, but I would continue to support the companies that are doing things the hard way and the more expensive way and supporting them.
This reminds me of like you, I was immersed in the bodybuilding world at one time. And I remember I'm drawing a blank on the name, but they came out with this new protein powder. And this protein powder was so special. It was designed by this doctor only to use on burn victims in the hospital.
Metrics.
Exactly. And then they were like, oh, it's just an amazing product. And you get these 2 canisters and you have to mix, a third of one and 2/3 of the other or something like that. You'd run out of one. And they never said what was in it, but it was this anti-catabolic product. It was just amazing. It, was just this amazing product. And when they finally analyzed it, it was just like whey protein or something, no different.
Yeah. And I took tons of it. So I hear you. I fell into those traps early on too, all the marketing hype. And that's
they did a great job with that.
Yeah. And that's why I'm so driven to educate on the marketing issues that you're talking about. And speaking of that, probably my last one that I'll throw at you is just the idea of just crazy claims. When you say like 880% more, strength or 700% more testosterone or whatever. So know that like study data can be manipulated so that like you have like the intervention arm, the one that's getting the supplement, maybe they have, 0.1% change. And then the placebo arm had 0.01% change. So it's 10 times bigger difference, but both of them basically didn't change at all. But then you can say 10 times the, muscle mass or 10 times the testosterone or what, like stuff like that is ridiculous. Like tell us what actually happened in the study with real measurable outcomes that are clear. Again, it's all about transparency. So like claims that are too good to be true typically are, and the FDA will often crack down on those. So I wouldn't trust a company that's using manipulative data like that.
I totally agree with you. Unfortunately, the same thing occurs in drugs too. Some of the data on statins is like double the decreased risk of a heart attack. And then they go, okay, out of 100,000 people, 2 people had a heart attack instead of 1 or something.
Right.
So technically they're correct, but it's really, distorting the data.
For sure. Yeah, I agreed 100%.
Okay, Shawn, this is, we're getting towards the end here. So I really appreciate some of the information you provided. Very fascinating. There's a million different things we could talk about. And maybe at some point in the future, we could take another crack at some of the important topics like exercise and other things in your book. But thank you so much for spending some time with us. And how can our listeners and viewers find out more about you and about your book? And do you have products available or?
Yeah, those are great questions. ShawnWells.com is my site where there's a lot more about me and there's free guides, ShawnWells. And then my book, which is doing extremely well right now that we're talking about, Energy Formula. And if you go to the site, energyformula.com, you also get bonuses, a free fasting for energy guide, a hidden chapter on natural movement, some Q&As. I have a recipe book, all that stuff's free. If you go through energyformula.com to get Energy Formula, the book. And then I'm on Instagram at Shawn Wells, again, ShawnWells. And then I'm on Clubhouse at Biohacking. I'm doing a lot of talks there. And I think that's most of it. And then as far as supplements, there's a bunch I have out there, but there's hundreds. So I don't really want to promote one over the other. I try and stay away from that. But it's been a blessing to formulate for so many companies.
Awesome. Thank you, Shawn.
Yeah, thank you for having me on, Ben. Have a great day. Appreciate it.
Thank you, listeners, for making it all the way through this episode of the Rational Wellness Podcast. Please take a few minutes and go to Apple Podcasts and give us a 5-star ratings and review. That would really help us so more people can find us in their listing of health podcasts. I'd also like to let everybody know that I now have a few openings for new clients for nutritional consultations. If you're interested, please call my office in Santa Monica at 310-395-3111. That's 310-395-3111. And take one of the few openings we have now for a individual consultation for nutrition with Dr. Ben Weitz. Thank you and see you next week.